So let's start with why be a parent. And objectivists are often accused of, we don't want kids, Ayn Rand didn't have kids, objectivism's anti-family, anti-children, yet both of you, Gina has, you have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
How old?
16 months.
16 months.
Counting.
And Rebecca?
I have 3 boys. One of them is almost 7. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old who was born right in the middle of COVID.
Corona baby.
Yeah, that that must have been difficult.
Well, it was actually good because at the time we were trying to develop at-home programs and we were using all of our children as guinea pigs. So it was actually very useful.
There you go. That's good to have a profession that's consistent with your family life and home life. It's all right. So let's start with why should anybody consider being a parent? What's the motivation? Why were you interested?
You've had 3 times them so far, so I feel like you're even more qualified.
Yeah, I mean, after 2, we quit. We figured we'd have to go from man-to-man defense to zone basketball technology, and we figured we were done. 2 is tough enough. 3 seemed like.
Well, look, I think there are various reasons to have children. I think different people have different reasons, but certainly a reason is that you're just really interested in seeing a little person develop and grow up and become himself, and become fulfilled in whatever way makes sense for that person. And I think that's a really good reason to be a parent. It's a really selfish reason. It means that you love yourself, you love human life, you're interested in kind of all of the wonderful magic of the way that it unfolds from infancy. So that's certainly why I became a parent. I think, the reasons to avoid are things that are about making that human being sort of subordinate to your life in some way. So things like carry on my family business, or, do the things I wish that I had done when I was young, or, prove that I'm a good person or that my life has meant something. Or even just like carry on your beliefs, the things that you think are true and good, right? So there's all kinds of reasons not to have children, and the real reason to have children is it's just fascinating. I think most parents can just attest to the magic of a child saying his first word, or the first time he opens a door or climbs up the stairs, to the point where people who are not parents, we drive them crazy with the little things that our children do that we find very exciting and fascinating. What do you think, Gina?
I mean, I strongly second all of the reasons on both sides, both the good ones and the not so good ones for having kids. I mean, in a way, I feel like we're both a little bit biased in that, as Yaron alluded to, like our careers and our life pursuits are inherently intertwined with our love of humans and human development. And so in a certain way, at least by the time I'd grown up and become interested in the things I'm interested in, it was somewhat of a no-brainer for me. But in a sense, it's still not a no-brainer, because there's this kind of abstracted idea of having kids where before I'd ever actually interacted with friends who had kids and spent time babysitting friends' kids and saw some of the tantrums and saw some of the complexities of trying to figure out travel schedules and, like the actual reality on the ground. I think I wanted to have kids, but it was floating to some extent. And I think in a way I wanted them more, and also in a much more earned and genuine way, once I also grappled with some of the real costs. And I think that's a really important step to take, when someone's considering it.
Yeah, I think you have to want it in the fullness of what it actually is. And it's not always pretty or romantic. I think that's very true.
How much of that were you aware of before you had your first child?
Me? Yeah.
One of you.
Well, I mean, Ray and I waited a very long time to have children because we wanted to kind of be married and start our lives first. We sort of took our time, and when we were ready, we were really ready. Actually, I remember us both talking before we had children and being sort of worried, would we stop growing as people once we had children? Would they sort of soak up all of our energy, and it would sort of derail us? And we have found just the opposite, that it pushes you tremendously as a person. You really live up to your children and try to be your best self because of your children. And that's part of the appeal, honestly, is that they kind of inspire you.
Yeah. I think when it becomes the kind of hardship that you've embraced because you've done some of that thinking and simulating ahead and have realized, oh yeah, this is a worthy challenge, then all of the complexity and all the struggle, it becomes inspiration, right? It just becomes fodder for growth, which I think is true of most of life's challenges, right? Where it can become a drain and a liability and a kind of unwelcome surprise, to the extent that someone goes into it a little bit more naively and expecting that their kids are just going to be little copies of them, and then gets really frustrated when they have a really low tolerance for certain kinds of activities. They're, for the kinds of art or the kind of sports or the kind of like approach to decorating, that you're so wedded to as a parent. So yeah, as far as for me, just to come back to your question, you're on.
Yep.
Again, so, I kind of feel like I cheated, partly in the sense that I took my time, mostly because I took my time finding the person that I actually wanted to have the kid with. And in the process also matured a lot and met a lot of people with children and just got to know myself better and became somewhat established in kind of my career trajectory. And so I had a lot more of a sense at that point of what to expect. But I can sort of imagine an alternative scenario, say if I had married young, or if I had been a little bit less experienced and had a little bit less to go on. I can imagine, and I've seen circumstances where people actually don't do the kind of advanced projection where they kind of find themselves in a situation they didn't really think it through, and here they are with kids, where it can really go very different ways, depending on at that moment in time, kind of how do they think about it and embrace it, and do they lean in, and then does it really blossom into a great love and major life project for them.
That's interesting, because we did get married very young and waited a long time. So all three of us kind of waited because we knew it was going to be a challenge, right? We knew it was a big deal. We wanted to live a life as a couple because we knew having children changes the dynamics. So it's interesting that we all waited, because I think that's the rational thing to do. I think it just makes sense.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it doesn't actually change your life right away. At first, it's just like having a little chia pet. It's just
without sleep, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, you feed it, it sleeps, you feed it, it sleeps, you sleep.
People have very different experiences of that early stage of parenting. I just want to say for the record.
Yeah.
It's harder for some than others.
All I remember is going off to school, because I was in the middle of I was just starting my PhD. And going back to school in Revital would be breastfeeding, and coming home hours later, and Revital was still there breastfeeding. And,
Yep.
And it was just a sight. And I've got a little diary we did at some point where we're just keeping track of the day in one of those first few weeks. And it was breastfeeding, and it was 15 minutes sleep, breastfeeding, 10 minutes of alertness, breastfeeding, sleep, 10 minutes.
About right.
He never slept for more than 20 minutes in a 24-hour period straight in those first few weeks. I mean, he was something. It was unbelievable. So it was definitely different. It was a different lifestyle suddenly thrust on you. Yeah, but we were ready. I mean, we loved it. And I agree in terms of the motivation. I mean, I've always wanted to have kids, partially because I've always liked children. I've always liked the experience of interacting with them, but I never really understood why. It took time and maturity to understand why. But we did. Initially, I wanted 4, and we stopped at 2 because of the sheer workload.
Yeah, well, Ray wants 6, but I think I'm going to settle in at 3. So.
Yes, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? Ultimately.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith.
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right. All right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrooksShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.